Hey, and welcome. I'm Dave, and you are listening to Life Is Peachy, a nostalgia-fueled podcast that allows me to sit here and waffle on about the bands and the albums that became the soundtrack to my life. Growing up in the 90s, the early 2000s, and while we're at it, sharing a few memories from Her Name Is Murder Productions. So if you have been following this podcast, then you would know that from a very young age, I have had two major passions, film and music. And through my production house, Her Name Is Murder Productions, I have spent a large portion of my life producing music videos and music documentaries for the bands I love. But if we were to go back to the late 90s, I dreamt of fronting a band. At a time when nu metal fever was hot, that melting pot crossed oceans, reaching Australia, and fell into my lap. At a point in time in my life when all I could really think about was music.
Out of your mind. Ain't it cool?
I dreamed of writing music, landing a major label record deal, touring the world, and playing shows with my mates, and vicariously started living this out through all the bands I was falling in love with, all the CDs I had on loop, blasting through my bedroom stereo.
Goddamn, what a rush!
And so I did start writing songs, and I did start a band in high school with my best friends, and before I knew it, we were playing shows in our city of Brisbane, Australia. And through this, I quickly realized, like with anything in life, to get somewhere with what you're passionate about, it requires a lot of time, hard work, perseverance, and a strong belief in yourself, and also some talent. While I love the idea of being in a band, I was by no means an amazing songwriter or vocalist, and I found my heart was in wanting to be a filmmaker.
Come with me if you want to live.
I absolutely love hearing stories from others with regards to finding their passion and creating a life out of what they love doing, and today's guest is no exception to that. That epic moment when one comes across something that clicks. And from that point on, whether you're aware of it at the time or not, nothing will ever be the same, and there's no looking back. Cleveland's CHIMAIRA were a band that brought groove metal back to the forefront in the early 2000s with their crushing sophomore release, The Impossibility of Reason. This album put them on the international map as frontrunners for the new wave of metalcore bands dominating the globe. But just a couple of years prior to this, the band's major label debut on Roadrunner Records, Out of Existence, presented an interesting blend of groove, heavy, and nu metal. Often referred to as the black sheep of the band's back catalogue, but at the same time finding a special place among the fan base of the band, this album is a lot of fun and contains so many moments of impact, and when it comes down to it, Out of Existence really paved the way for the CHIMAIRA we all love today.
Disgusted by your presence now. I wonder what it would be like if you were down. Or could you cope? Could you really cope? Could you hope? Or would you sit and wait for me? Seeking for my place now.
So it goes without saying, I am extremely excited to jump into this album with the one and only Rob Arnold. Welcome to the Life Is Peachy Podcast, and thank you for taking the time to come on here and celebrate the anniversary of CHIMAIRA's debut.
Hey, what's happening? Stoked to see what it's going to be all about, you know? Life is peachy.
Yes, yes it is. thanks to music, and well, definitely right now in this moment, because we are here to, of course, celebrate the 20th anniversary of your major label debut, Pass Out of Existence. 20 years. Just hearing that must trip you out, right?
Just hearing it, yeah, that's a bit of a trip. I mean, the fact that it is really 20 years hasn't really sunk in yet. I don't know. Yeah, it's cool. It's a cool milestone, and I got to start thinking about it more. You know, there's a vinyl re-release coming out, but just I think some things will start happening where it'll begin to sink in for me, but it really hasn't yet.
This is a really exciting time right now because so many great albums have either just recently or are just about to hit that 2-decade milestone. These albums are coming from a point in time that many fans are very much still living and reminiscing.
Mm-hmm.
If
Definitely.
we were to look back on you, back to those really formative years in life when music can play such a big part in shaping identity and who we are. Before playing in bands, before writing your own music, was there a moment for you as a child or in your younger years where you really noticed music or music had some sort of impact on you?
I was in 3rd grade, and there was a kid in my class I was friends with, this guy named Court, and he had long hair, and I was just intrigued by that. And even when he'd stop by my house, the first time my mom thought there was a girl at the door for me. You just don't see a lot of 3rd graders with long hair, guys. We started hanging out and went over to his house. He had 3 older brothers that were all just metalheads. The entire family was like a heavy metal family. I mean, because the entire house had Maiden and Van Halen posters up everywhere. There were amps in every room. The garage had a huge jam spot, drums, everything, just guitars everywhere. The moment I saw that, I was just totally infatuated with it. I thought it was amazing, and Court started playing guitar for me, and I thought it was the coolest thing. I went home that day, told my mom that I needed to get a guitar right away, and that's where I started playing. And I had an older sister who was into 80s hair metal and stuff, Def Leppard, Bon Jovi, Skid Row, stuff like that. And she would have boyfriends that'd be coming over, and I'd hear music blasting from their rooms, and the boyfriends would come in and play Metallica riffs on my guitar. And I sucked still at the time, but just seeing them play it was a total inspiration. And then finally one day I heard Paradise City on the radio late at night. I wasn't supposed to be listening to music. I was supposed to be asleep for the night at school in the morning, and I heard Paradise City from Guns N' Roses, and just something about that just really had an effect on me, and I'll never look back in my quest. From there, I discovered Metallica, Megadeth, Sepultura, all that kind of stuff, kept getting heavier. It all just kind of stemmed right there, just from a dude in my 3rd grade class playing guitar, and here I am.
Once falling in love with heavy music and then getting your hands on your own guitar, your own instrument, when did you then realize you loved playing guitar and it was something you really wanted to do?
The first guitar I got was an acoustic, and so I started taking lessons just at a local music shop, and rock and roll hadn't really hit me yet, but there was a neon yellow Tanara Ibanez at the music shop where I was taking lessons that I'd stare at every time, like Wayne in Wayne's World looking at Excalibur, that white Fender Stratocaster, if you can recall the scene where he'd just go in and stare at it at the music shop all the time.
It will be mine. Oh, yes. It will be mine.
So every time I'd go to my lessons, I'd see this guitar and I'd always want it. So one day I asked my dad, oh man, I really want this thing, let's go get it. So he took me up there and we got it, a little PV practice amp that I'm looking at right now. I still have it, 8, 9, 10 years old, somewhere in there that I got this. But I remember bringing it home and plugging it in. And that was the first time that I really heard distortion And even though I couldn't put chords together, I didn't know power chords or anything at the time, just having distortion and the fact that distortion can kind of mask bad playing, I was just able to just beat on it and felt like a rock star. It just felt awesome, and that feeling, I'm sure for everybody, their first time is like many things your first time, you know, that you'll never forget. I got a wah pedal a little while later, and even though I didn't know what I was doing at all soloing, it sounded like I was soloing. The combination of that with my sister's boyfriends playing Metallica riffs as I was getting into Metallica to be like, whoa, these guys, just these regular guys, I mean, at the time, these older guys were probably 15, 16 years old or something, my sister's boyfriends, but they could play Metal Militia and Whiplash and stuff. Oh my God, that means I can do this too. So I really just started focusing on that stuff, and over time, I learned all the Metallica books. I didn't think much of it at the time, but people would be like, wow, you can play that stuff. And I was like, yeah. So I started attracting other musicians in my area, and we'd jam Metallica songs, and every day was about coming home from school and just getting in the garage and just playing together, whether you had a band or not. It's like 3 of us just on guitar doing Metallica melodies and stuff like that. And then finally somebody in the neighborhood got a drum set. We didn't know how to play, but we would just start jamming, and that's just always how it's been for me. I just love that feeling. I've never stopped since.
Passout's lineup consisted of Mark Hunter on vocals, Jim Lamarca on bass, Andols Herrick on drums, Chris Spicuzza on electronics, Jason Hagar on rhythm guitar, and of course, yourself on lead. And you would remain with CHIMAIRA until the end of 2011 before the band itself would break up soon after in 2014. But before all of this was a band forming in the late 90s and finding the right members, each of them essential ingredients for the recipe we all now know as CHIMAIRA. From jamming and playing covers, when did all of that transition into wanting to pursue the band thing?
Well, yeah, we were kind of doing bands, just jamming, trying to play Stone Temple Pilots songs and Metallica songs and stuff, but weren't really that good at it. But I just always felt driven and wanted to do it. I didn't know at the time that I wanted to be playing on stage or doing it for real. It was just a pure love for it that I wanted to keep doing it. I didn't really have any goals in mind. Then when I was 16, 17, the music scene here in Cleveland, there was a lot of hardcore and metal going on, and guys that I would meet years later when we formed CHIMAIRA, guys like Mark and Jim and Matt DeVries and Jason Hagar, who Matt DeVries replaced, they were all about 4 or 5 years older than me. Me and my younger friends would be going to shows, local shows, seeing their bands play, and I just remember being like, man, I want to do this. So Andols and I got our band together, Sanctum, and we started playing shows with Mark and Jim's band and Ben Schigel, our producer, his band. There was just such a happening scene going on in Cleveland that it was easy to become a part of it, and everybody wanted to be a part of it. And that then led to, a few years later, Mark hearing my name through the grapevine when they were looking for another guitarist for this new band they had just formed, CHIMAIRA. And this was around summer 98 they formed CHIMAIRA, and my first time jamming with them was probably January 99. But even at that time, I didn't know what it could become, didn't really have a ton of expectations. I just knew that I wanted to just keep playing and making music. All the other stuff that came with that, subsequently after that turned into touring and all that kind of stuff, was just a part of the process that I hadn't anticipated early on, but certainly enjoyed throughout.
Can you tell me a little bit about that first jam with CHIMAIRA in early 1999?
Well, I'll back up slightly. After the band Sanctum, we kind of broke up because guys were just doing their own thing, started getting jobs or going away to school, things like that. After Sanctum, just for fun, I had this other band going with this guy, AE. He was the bass player, and I was actually playing drums in this band only because we couldn't find a drummer. So I was just like, I'll give it a try. I ended up just having a natural knack for it. Could play a beat, and we were writing songs, and nothing really happened from that. But then AE went on to be contacted by CHIMAIRA, and he was their bass player. And he told Mark, yeah, I know this guy Rob, who he's actually playing drums in this band that I was playing with, but he's a really good guitar player. One day, I just got this call from Mark, and at the time, I knew who Mark was because he was the singer of this awesome Cleveland band called Skipline, with Jim Lamarca and Ben Schigel. And so I was just super surprised. I remember hearing that Jason Hagar from Ascension and Mark Hunter from Skipline were forming this new band. And I was just at the time working at Pizza Hut, where Andols ended up working with me, Mark ended up working there. And I remember being jealous, like, wow, or not jealous, but envious of, wow, these guys are doing something, this is gonna be cool. And then sure enough, a couple months later, because of AE's recommendation, I just got a call out of the blue from Mark. He's like, hey, this is Mark Hunter. I hear we live right by each other. And we ended up living like 2 streets away from each other. I could have walked to his house in 5 minutes. He's like, why don't I just come over? We'll play some riffs or whatever. And I had a little setup in my basement going already with drums and guitar. At that time, I had already started experimenting with recording with 4-tracks and 8-track machines and things like that. Still just doing music, but really, I'd kind of put it out of my mind that anything was gonna happen with it. I was moving up the Pizza Hut ladder, whatever that is.
I'll probably end up working at Great America, mopping up hurl and lung butter. Sure.
And kind of thought, all right, well, I like the restaurant business as well, and playing music, I didn't think it was gonna be my career. But Mark came over, and we just started jamming Slayer riffs and Fear Factory riffs. And he said, well, why don't you come down and jam with us? And so that might have been like the next day. He came and picked me up. CHIMAIRA had already gotten a rehearsal spot in downtown Cleveland. And I showed up there, met the rest of the guys. We just started jamming. And I don't ever remember an official, all right, you're in the band, or anything like that. It just happened. We just practiced that day, and then practiced again the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and it became literally a Monday through Friday thing. And over the first couple jams, the drummer that they had at the time was a lefty, and he only had a single bass drum. And I knew that Mark and Jason wanted to do more double bass stuff. And I said, hey, I got this guy, Andols. He went to high school with us too. He's not doing anything, and he's a fantastic drummer. You guys should check him out. And I played him some of our old demos, and next thing you know, Andols is in the band. Just kind of started forming like that.
Upon joining those guys for those first jams, and like you mentioned, being aware of their previous bands and their talent, and maybe even in some way looking up to them as musicians and creatives, did you feel ready to step up to something like that? And were there any nerves or apprehension leading up to that moment?
I never thought about it in a way that I wasn't up to it, but I never considered myself really good or anything either. I just didn't think about it like that. Just played what I played, and I didn't have any trouble playing what they were playing. Their style was exactly like my style, and it's kind of all from being cut from that same Cleveland cloth and the hardcore and metal scene that was happening at the time. I already loved all those bands' music, so we were all just kind of playing the same riffs already, so it was just natural. It felt really good. Everything felt great. We knew that. I think we all knew right away that just everything felt good.
Every time I trust you, I lose in the end. Every time I trust you, I lose in the end. Every time I trust you, I lose in the end. I feel disgusted in myself. I love how you can call me every gentle innocent while I'm out here trying to better myself. You're a pig when it comes to my emotions. You drop me in the wake because you have no devotion.
As alluded to before, no one knew what to come. We all knew that we wanted to do it. Like, all of us had been doing smaller local shows for a while, and at this point now, we wanted to do it for real. And that was kind of the mindset of the band as well, that everybody has to be on board 100%. Mark was very ambitious with booking shows and hooking up with out-of-town guys and trading shows for people to come into Cleveland. We go out to wherever, Louisville or Buffalo or Detroit, things like that. And everything just started happening really, really quickly. And a lot of our determination, perseverance, and amazing work ethic, we knew that this was our priority. It all just started just happening quickly.
And from here on out, it seems like it was a bit of a whirlwind for CHIMAIRA, with a lot of activity and a lot happening. Touring the US and recording both the self-titled EP in 1999 and This Present Darkness EP in 2000. How did the band then fall under the radar of record labels and eventually come to sign with Roadrunner Records?
So we had our East Coast Empire debut EP, This Present Darkness, and right after we recorded that is when Chris Spicuzza, our keyboard samplist, he joined the band, and he jammed in a spot right next to CHIMAIRA with his band where he was the bass player. But he was attracted to our sound that he'd hear through the walls, and I think our work ethic, and Chris kind of just started hanging around us, and Mark had always been a huge fan of Nine Inch Nails and bands that use a lot of the keyboard elements and things like that, so he brought him on, which we're all cool with, you know, having atmospheric stuff going on in the songs, having dead time in between songs live, because he could be doing sampling stuff, so it seemed like a good idea. And with that came quite a few of Chris's connections as well, and one of those was a guy named Tom Hazard. He just helps out bands. He had a good ear for just finding talent, and he was keyed in with a lot of the record labels, and he was like his own independent A&R type of guy. So he took us under our wing and got us a showcase for Roadrunner. And going back to the East Coast Empire, This Present Darkness EP, that was some credibility for us. So this local band from Cleveland with this small independent deal has already sold 10,000 of their CDs by this point. They're constantly playing shows, everything. You Roadrunner people got to check them out, as well as other labels. So he set up a showcase for us in LA. We drove out from Cleveland to LA, which is like 2,000, 2,500 miles just for one show, played it, and drove back. That's how important the showcase was, but some labels were there, and Roadrunner took an interest, but it was 8 to 10 months, maybe a year after that showcase that Roadrunner finally signed us.
What do you think you're doing? Only me and Garth get to talk to the camera. Come on.
I'm no stranger to preaching my love for Roadrunner Records on this podcast. The endless amount of bands on their roster, particularly throughout the 90s and into the early to mid 2000s, essentially created the backbone to what I loved listening to and set the precedence for what I sought after in future music. And the turn of the century presented itself to be a really interesting period of releases for Roadrunner, which kind of saw them expanding their horizon and taking some risks, breaking the formula to some extent, and CHIMAIRA's debut presented itself to the world smack bang in the middle of this exciting time.
Exactly.
Amen, Slipknot, and Soulfly all released their self-titled debuts in '99, along with some other unique releases in the same year, such as Spineshank's Strictly Diesel and Exposition from France's Out. And the new millennium continued with more exciting debuts from Glassjaw, Everything You've Ever Wanted to Know About Silence, Dry Kill Logic, The Darker Side of Nonsense, 5.0, Untitled, 36 Crazy Fists, Bitterness the Star, Killswitch Engage, Alive or Just Breathing. This isn't even taking into account the legacy of the label and their back catalogue of classics from bands that literally helped shape and define heavy music as we know it. So, long story short, were you a fan of the label and their roster at the time?
Absolutely. We all
Sepultura,
were.
obviously.
Oh man, Sepultura is one of my biggest influences ever, but of course, Fear Factory, Machine Head, all those bands, it seemed like an insurmountable dream to be part of Roadrunner, but now that it was this reality, like, wow, we're in touch with Roadrunner. They know of us. They're considering signing us. They've come to see us, all sorts of things. And so, yeah, that was an amazing thing. We were definitely quite aware of what was happening at the time and wanted to be a part of Roadrunner for sure, because they were the quintessential metal label. They could do for us what we wanted at the time and what so many other bands wanted at the time as well. Whether anything would have happened or not, it was really cool to have been a part of that opportunity. Even seeing pictures of the bands on the back of the CDs and what shirts they were wearing would introduce you to other Roadrunner bands or other extreme music, you know? So it was just a really cool time.
Listen to your friend Billy Zane. He's a cool dude.
into Pass Out of Existence, what were the hopes and intentions for the band and your major label debut?
All we wanted to do was be huge. We wanted to be a monster metal band, playing big stages for big crowds. Now we're aware of this, where I'd said 5 years before this, I didn't even consider that stuff. Maybe it just seemed like such an unreachable dream that it's just not something you thought about. But now, having a taste a little bit, you just want more, and you realize that being a part of the Roadrunner roster or on a record label in itself, it's just the next big step on the mountain or whatever to keep rising up. We basically had a collection of songs that we had written and had been playing live besides This Present Darkness stuff. So we were already probably playing songs like Severed, Dead Inside, Sphere, Painting the White to Gray. So there was a collection of songs that we had already written and we were playing on. And when we got the deal, Pass Out of Existence, that collection of songs was basically the collection of material that we had written up until that point. There were a few new ones that we wrote, Split. Force Life. Jade. A lot of the ideas and the material had been written before that, but our expectations were to put the album out and just keep it growing. The initial sales and success of that album weren't quite what we expected, and so it was a dose of reality, and in hindsight, what we deserve. Very few bands just blow up on their debut major label release. Very few bands get lucky. It takes work, but everyone's naive at that point.
I felt so worthless, but you saved me.
You think the album's gonna be huge. Everyone loves their own stuff. You think it's the best thing and that people are gonna really love it, but that wasn't really the case. People, I think, were kind of taken back by it a little bit, and Roadrunner's expectations for the success of the album were greater than the reality of it. But that's okay, because it gave us the motivation to keep moving on and do The Impossibility of Reason, which really sparked things or took things to another level. I consider Pass Out of Existence and that entire experience monumental in determining our course from there on.
Released October 2nd, 2001, CHIMAIRA's major label debut sold 44,000 copies in the United States alone, and it's common knowledge that this album features an altogether different sound when compared to the band's later albums, leaning more towards nu metal rather than the groove metal style featured in later material.
Trying to figure out a way of your as we drift away. What will come from our soul? But your as we drift away.
Pass Out of Existence features re-recordings of two songs, Sphere and Painting the White to Grey, both of which were included in 99's This Present Darkness EP. And this EP was produced by Ben Shiegel, who incidentally would go on to produce all of Chimaira's future releases, all bar 2007's Resurrection, and, well, yeah, of course, the album we were talking about today. That job would fall into the hands of Andrew Mudrock, also known as Mudrock, an American record producer specializing predominantly in the rock genre, and at the time was best known for producing Godsmack's debut and double platinum sophomore Awake. Now, on paper, having Mudrock produce your debut seems like a slightly obscure choice.
Yeah.
Was it the band or the record label's decision to work with him, and how was that experience?
Working with a bigger producer like Mudrock, and at first we had never heard Mudrock's name when it was first brought up to us. Working with a bigger producer was never really a thought for us. It was more of the label's thing. They didn't really trust the formula that we had from before, where we were just recording at Spider Studio, a local garage in Cleveland, with an unknown producer, Ben Shiegel. At the time, we were building our sound together, but Roadrunner, rightfully so, didn't really trust that. They were investing a lot of money into the band, and they wanted us to go with somebody professional to protect their investment more. So they gave us a list of producers that they had in mind, and Mudrock had just come off of a platinum record.
Maybe I'm wrong on this one, but for me, the beast doesn't include selling out.
So that was alluring. Oh, okay, this guy just made a platinum record and it sounds great. He doesn't really have any heavy metal background, but maybe that could be cool too. Maybe that could be to our advantage, actually. So we ended up choosing him from a short list. And another thing that helped is he really liked our music and expressed interest in wanting to work with us. He thought it was unique and would be a challenge for him as well, since he wasn't really versed in the heavy metal world. So that's what we did. We went with that experience, and the experience itself was fantastic. Young guys, I don't even think I was 21 at the time. We were ranging anywhere from 18 to probably 24 years old. Taken out to California, everything was the royal treatment, I'd say, in terms of our accommodations and what the studio life was like, and the studio itself, and the engineers that were hired to work with us. Just everything was totally awesome. It was so fun. That was the best. As I said before about how every day was coming home from school and jamming with guys in the garage, now this was my life, our job, to wake up every morning and just go to the studio and create and write music and just have fun and laugh, and that's what we did for 2 months. That was just badass. I still look back on that with such joy, that experience.
Yeah, you can hear it in your voice, man, and the way you talk about that moment in your life, that it was a very special time for you and probably for everyone involved. And yeah, it's just really awesome to get some insight like that into the experience. It's really cool.
But the production itself and the way it turned out kind of wasn't exactly what we had in mind. I think CHIMAIRA was building this sound, this production formula that we had started establishing with Ben Shiegel, which we returned to then for the Impossibility Reason and there on out. And you know that as the CHIMAIRA sound and the way our albums were produced and the tones and everything about the albums after Pass Out of Existence. So Pass Out of is kind of like the black sheep in terms of our productions in our discography. It was necessary, I think. Perhaps we wouldn't have known to return to our roots and return to the production style that we had began to develop before Pass Out of Existence.
Yeah. Now, 2001's Pass Out of Existence was following a massive year of nu metal debut releases with the likes of Infest by Papa Roach, Gift from Taproot, Mudvayne's extremely unique LD50, Kitty's Spit, Down with the Sickness from Disturbed, and the game-changing Hybrid Theory, Linkin Park's crushing debut, which sold 27 million copies worldwide, making it the best-selling rock album of the 21st century and changing the scope of nu metal forever. Now, by today's standards, it's very common for bands to cross-pollinate, mix, and combine genres and not find themselves restrained within the walls of any particular sound or genre. There really are no rules anymore, and music is always evolving. That's obvious, and it's been that way since the dawn of time. But what makes something like Pass Out of Existence so interesting to me is that combination of the band's metal roots with nu metal. And this was really something that was happening not only with metal, but any genre was fair game and could be intertwined with nu metal.
You trust me?
Of course I trust you.
Some resonating more than others, but nevertheless mixing it up with new sounds and new influences to create these hybrid releases and fluid genres. Spineshank brought in that industrial flavor big time with The Height of Callousness. El Nino had their Latin flavor throughout, and here we had CHIMAIRA implementing nu metal throughout their groove, thrash, metal sound. Okay, CHIMAIRA could be one of the best bands with regards to breakdowns. And I'm just gonna have to do this, so I apologize. I'll be back in a moment, but what we're gonna do now is podcast version of a montage, and I am going to smash through some of the huge breakdowns from Pass Out of Existence.
Nice.
There are a bunch. All right, let's go. Let's do this.
Stick your
somebody better call roadside assistance because we have a breakdown.
Wow.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. I couldn't help myself. I'm sure a lot of fans would be curious about this, and so I'm just gonna ask it in layman's terms. Why does Pass Out of Existence sound dramatically different from other CHIMAIRA releases?
Yeah. There was a lot happening with nu metal at that time. Everything from band's vibe and sound to the image, and we were definitely caught right in the middle of that. But a lot of our roots were still heavier roots. All of us loving Metallica and Sepultura, and then way heavier stuff too, from Deicide and Cannibal Corpse, Morbid Angel, Suffocation. We all listened to that, and that shined through, and I think that's part of what people find unique about our sound, and especially around that time. Like an album like Pass Out of Existence, it had a lot of nu metal elements, but it also had death metal elements to it, and perhaps some Metallica influence. But what kept it very nu metal was we were trying to adhere to what was popular just subconsciously. With the 7 strings and that low tuning and a bunch of the bounce and then the samples. Chris was still coming into his own, and the production team for Pass Out of Existence really put a lot of those big samples, they put it into the forefront of the music. Those futuristic electronic sounding samples like Spine Shank, Fear Factory, quite up front in the mix. And I think that has a lot to do with the sound too. That's one thing that we'll hear all the time, that the samples really took more of a back seat when Impossibility came around. Why is that? Out throughout the rest of the albums, I'd say, but on Pass Out is one of the biggest differences, that the samples are far more of a present instrument, as much so as the guitars and things like that, and that's another element that separates it from our albums moving forward from there.
No stairwell.
Looking back on the album now, are there any particular songs that really resonate with you, or that you think are actually quite good songs? You know, songs that perhaps you weren't such a big fan of at the time?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know that there's any songs on it that I think this song rules. I appreciate them, but it's not one of my favorite albums, and I'm not trying to diss it. It's just that I'm certainly biased as a band member and one of the main writers. Like any artist, or most artists I would say, that I feel the material got better with time and really evolved and came into its own. I can't speak for the rest of the guys, but I'm personally just a much bigger fan of the later material because of the songwriting, the technicality, and just things we were able to do arrangement-wise and skill-wise as we grew up and became a better band. Like an athlete, movie stars can get better. There's always exceptions. But are there any that I give more credit to than I used to? For some reason, I like Jade a lot more now than I did initially.
Nice. That's one of my favorites. I love Jade.
Cool, cool. at first I wasn't the hugest fan of it. I remember thinking that it was maybe too lengthy and drony, but now I appreciate more of its darkness, and I hear Mark's message more in it. Maybe you've seen one of the first videos I did when I started making videos for YouTube was a Out of Existence Medley.
Yes.
I did like 10 songs or something, and when I chose Rizzo for one of those songs, revisiting that, I was just like, man, these riffs are badass. And mostly those are Stephen Carpenter from the Deftones. That's one that I like more than I did at the time. I didn't dislike it at the time. Split's a good one, just such a staple to our legacy. I think also being our first video, which I guess you could consider would be like our first single. Let Go has a lot of nostalgia to me because as the album opener, a live staple and certainly one of our heavier, more aggressive ones that we took elements from moving forward with the Impossibility Reason in terms of that thrashier, faster aggressiveness type of sound. So I don't know how well that answered your question, but just looking back, some of my thoughts on a couple of the tunes.
So would it be safe to say then that Out of Existence is more of a landmark, you know, in terms of learning about yourself as a musician and you guys as a band of songwriters, your dynamics and what you wanted and didn't want for the future of the band?
Definitely, well said.
Touring with Slayer in 2009, was that a moment where you had to pinch yourself? You know, something like that had become a reality because of the band you were in and the music you were playing.
Definitely, and I didn't even consider the opportunities Pass Out gave us and getting signed and all that. Yeah, to be able to do things like that, where you get the tour with Slayer, just hearing about the possibility, where our manager at the time saying that this was a possibility was just kind of like, no way. And then managers talk with agents and lawyers and labels and all that. It's a lot to make that happen. I don't think Slayer came to our manager and said, we want to take this band out. I'm sure we submitted for it. They probably listened to us a little bit, decided to give us a chance to take us out. So just knowing that was amazing. Our first show on the tour was in New Orleans. 10 or 12 hour drive from Cleveland. Just the drive down there, the excitement, the vibe amongst the camp, you know, as we're going down there to join up and tour with Slayer. Surreal at the time, it's still surreal even to talk about now. But showing up there at the first venue and seeing the guys and then standing on the side of the stage while they played because we could. And then afterwards, just hanging in the dressing room, meeting them, realizing that they're just regular dudes too. They're still godly, don't get me wrong. But they were cool and super nice, and then every day you just walk right up to them, hang out with them, ask them whatever you want, talk to them about whatever you want, wander into their dressing room, grab a beer, whatever. It was just unbelievable that that was happening. And you hear of all the horror stories of bands being heckled that opened for Slayer. We got a little bit of that, but for the most part, we surprised people. A lot of Slayer fans maybe will give an opening band a chance for 30 seconds of their first song, and if you pass that, then you'd see them getting into it. We got a few Slayer chants here and there, and you just gotta muscle through those, but for the most part, we were very well accepted from that. A lot of people heard of us in that tour. Still a lot of people all the time say that was the first time they ever heard of us or saw us, so we have a lot to be grateful for in every level for that opportunity to jam with Slayer, and certainly a notch on the belt, let me tell you what.
You're talking about having 30 seconds to win over the crowd to prove yourself. Do you remember what the opening song was for that tour with Slayer?
If I had to take a guess, I'd say it would have been Let Go.
Well, that's where I see things just a little differently. Contract or no, I will not bow to any sponsor.
What was the reality of being a full-time musician signed to Roadrunner Records back then, when in many ways it also seemed like that was the tail end of the glory days for such an opportunity? Newer heavy bands signing to a major record label and getting to experience the prosperity of that.
Well, we certainly weren't making a lot of money, but that's not important when you're really young because you don't have a lot of responsibilities. That's why I say all the time that it's much easier to start a band when you're 20 than it is when you're 40, because when you're 40, you may have mortgages and kids and just so much more responsibilities. But when we were young and doing that stuff, just the opportunity to be out there, you made it work, even if you weren't coming home with any money. The way it really works for young bands is you collect your guarantee that you're paid each night for your performance, which could be nothing or it could be $50. I think that Slayer paid us $100 a night, but they didn't have to give us that because the opportunity was worth paying for. Bands pay to tour with Slayer.
It's like people only do things because they get paid. And that's just really sad.
That's when the label kicks in, if you have a good label, and they offer you tour support. So if the tour, in terms of travel and your crew, any accommodations and gear and whatever you may need, if that tour costs you $40,000, but you're only bringing in $4,000, they'll cover the $36,000 that you needed to break even. And that's kind of how tour support works. On that front, we were okay because we were just getting by, and that was good enough to allow us to continue to move forward. Playing those shows and doing it, it was just such a whirlwind. I suppose now that 20 years has passed, that makes it more difficult to consider too, but I didn't stop to smell the roses. Just the fact that we could see that people were enjoying it and a buzz was happening and people were coming to the shows and people were talking about us and being excited to see us. It was proof that something was working and we were really having fun while we were doing it. And coupled with it, we were able to continue with how things were going with the label, made us hungrier for more. Okay, this is working like this, perhaps we can make it work even more. But again, that was just subconscious too. We just knew that we needed to and could make it work.
What were some of the things you learned about yourself or even the band now that you were touring as a full-time musician in support of past Out of Existence? And yeah, how did all of that influence you going into the writing of what would be the follow-up, The Impossibility of Reason?
I don't know how much I learned about myself, but I learned throughout that process primarily that I wasn't as comfortable playing 7 strings. It just didn't feel as good to me as playing 6 strings. The super low tuning didn't have quite as much cut through the amplifier that I wanted to hear. And you could relate it to Slayer, you know, they're tuned, let's just call it to E, and they play with a lot of mid-range. There isn't a lot of bass in their guitars. They let Tom fill up the low end with his bass, and so that's why you can hear Slayer riffs so well. I mean, first, they're incredible riffs, and that's the most important thing, but they really cut through, and you hear it no matter what it is. South of Heaven or Dead Skin Mask, Scenes in the Abyss, all of those just big key riffs, they cut through so much, and I felt like with these super low 7 strings that I couldn't get that cut with the style of riffs that I wanted to be playing as well. So that's what I learned a lot from that experience, from that whole album cycle, was that I wanted to elevate our guitar sound somehow. In general, I wanted to be more guitar forward, more in your face, more riffy. Maybe I wouldn't have discovered that had we not been on the 7 strings initially for that album, but when that touring cycle was over, I started trying to convince the guys that our writing moving forward should perhaps be done on 6 strings. And I don't remember there being any opposition to it from Mark. I almost remember him kind of being like, well, that's what Machine Head tunes to, and they're super heavy. And I hear Drop C is the most evil tuning. Let's just try that. So that's just what we did. There wasn't any other thing about it. We played Drop C on Impossibility Reason and then moving forward because Machine Head did. You know, that's really the only reason. And then we just went to 6s, and that guitar sound that I had in my mind was realized. It worked exactly as I thought it would, and so we kind of never looked back at that. But personally, I don't know, there was just so much happening at that time. The tours then just kept coming and coming, and we were super busy, and it was time to follow up with another record. So I didn't have time to think about myself or anything that was going on really at the time. It was just, let's move forward, let's figure out a way to take this thing to the next level.
Okay, well, we'll take these home, run through them with a fine-tooth comb, cross the T's and dot the lowercase j's.
Really good time to strike right after Pass Out and into the Impossibility of Reason, because without knowing it, it proved that people were really hungry for the new wave of American heavy metal and that sound that was about to hit with the heavier stuff, thrashier stuff, guitar solos coming back, you know, just that sound that had kind of been missing for a while because of that transition from metal to grunge to new metal and then back to metal.
Man, I find it really interesting and really impressive, to be honest, how seamless that transition was between the 2 albums. I think for a lot of fans that either found you guys on Pass Out or perhaps even a little later with Impossibility, that there was no real shock between experiencing the 2 albums. I personally think that's something really impressive in terms of songwriting, because generally such a shift in sound and overall atmosphere and vibe of a band can really be a hard pill to swallow for fans. And here, CHIMAIRA really made it work, and you guys pulled it off without much casualty.
Yeah, well, thank you. It was a natural progression. There wasn't, we have to do this. It's just what felt right at the time. Going to the 6 strings, that was really the only conscious decision. Let's take the sound a little bit different with this. But in terms of the songwriting and what we were feeling at the time, all that was a just totally natural progression.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
The Impossibility of Reason actually reinvigorated my interest for groove metal again. And
Killer.
I mean, my love for heavy music was really born from discovering bands like Sepultura, Pantera, and of course, like so many of us, Metallica. And this was happening for me throughout the 90s, and it was that type of stuff that really laid out my blueprint and foundations with music. And then I fell under the spell of nu metal and, well, yeah, more so, as I just mentioned before, all these bands that were kind of infusing nu metal elements into their sound. I was a big fan of that, and I'm still a big fan of that now. But I remember hearing tracks like Cleansation, The Dehumanizing Process, Stig Murder, Overlooked, and of course the title track itself, and just being absolutely blown away. The Dehumanizing Process DVD and that epic full live set that came with it, that was on constant repeat on the TV in my lounge room, and I was so excited when you guys finally made your way to Australia for the first time.
I have great things to say about Australia. Always awesome shows, rabid fans. America, we're spoiled, saturated with music happening all the time, and just the passion for it in the faraway places or places pretty far from the U.S. They really took it in. It was really fun to go there. Grateful for that experience.
Where do I go from here now? Feeling I can't figure it out. I try, but I'm out. Where do I go from
Does it ever trip you out, or is it somewhat surreal to think back on something released 20 years ago, created this catalyst for fans around the world to love your music and continue following it through the decades?
It's definitely surreal. It's become who we all are. It's become our lives. This is kind of how it is. And wow, now that 20 years later, now that I'm 40 years old, it's like, all right, well, this is my life. I didn't think it was going to be like this, but I couldn't ask for anything better. We never thought that those albums early on would stand this test of time and that people would be talking about them 20 years later, sitting here having a chat about it. And I still hear all the time about how so many people discovered us with that album, so many people still love that album, how groundbreaking they thought the songs were. We didn't think they were at the time. So yes, it's absolutely surreal because we were just writing songs like every band, and the fact that people liked them and people still like them, we just got lucky. We're one of those lucky bands that it happened for us, you know?
It will be mine. Oh, yes. It will be mine.
Under the current climate and with having to adapt to the forever changing world around us at the moment, how is life for you today? You know, with your YouTube channel, your time and attention on various social media platforms, interacting with fans. What is it like for you putting yourself out there that way and sharing yourself online like you never have before?
I'd have to say that I never planned to really be releasing YouTube videos on a regular basis, and how it's just turned into my main gig at this point. I have a lot of little things working. I'm always hustling, always looking for good opportunities, but making YouTube videos has kind of become the forefront of my day each day. And I also have a lot of music in the works. I'm the type of guy that I work on a lot of little things at the same time. So I don't just work on one and get it out there. I'm working on 10 things a little bit at a time, and they'll eventually all come together and they'll eventually all work together. So my mindset is the bigger I can make my YouTube channel, the bigger platform I have to release independent music. When I released my debut album with my side band, The Elite, in 2018, I naively thought that just because of my CHIMAIRA fan base that I already had, that The Elite would be an instant success. But I learned that it doesn't really work that way, and my tiny social media network, in the grand scheme of things, wasn't enough to get the word out there like I was expecting it would, like it would have had it been on a label. The power of a record label and their promotional engines and just the team of people they have working for them every day to make all that happen, I simply had none of for that release, and the initial release fell flat on its face. And it was a wake-up call for me that made me realize, okay, if I'm gonna do this independently like this, I need to have a much bigger platform. I like to teach, I like to just do creative stuff all the time, I like to be constantly working, and so it'll be easy for me to just kind of make videos about restringing guitars or doing CHIMAIRA playthroughs, and that's kind of how it started. And when that started building, and it's been building slowly ever since, I'm realizing I'm building this platform, and it's all working together for when I'm ready to release my album. More people will know about it initially. Doesn't mean people have to buy it or take it in or anything like that, but at least people will have the opportunity to know that it exists, kind of like I was saying before, just the opportunity to play bigger shows. More people can see you, more people can hear about you. So that's just kind of my mindset about everything.
Yes, man, that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm really just enjoying this right now. I think I thrive on the nostalgia and the love for the music that people show. I'm so grateful for just people's outpouring of love for the music. And that's just so great as just somebody who started off with no expectations 20 years ago, but just loved to write riffs, to now have these people that tell stories about how the riffs and the songs and the lyrics and everything have changed their lives and bettered their existence, and just really they enjoy it. I love that because I get it, because Metallica and Megadeth and Pantera have done that for me, and now I'm doing that for others. I can't believe it. It doesn't get old. It's amazing that I can still be doing about this, and that was a part of something that 20 years later we can be talking about today, still with relevance and still with a point of interest for people, is a blessing.
We do the mega happy ending.
Oh, the mega happy ending, that's doable.
So those listening, be sure to head over to robarnoldworld.com. You'll find everything you could ever want and need right there. And in particular, if you're a CHIMAIRA fan and you haven't checked that out,
Huh?
What are you doing? Definitely need to head over there ASAP because it's an absolute gold mine, and Rob is really active in delivering content for the fans. And that sentiment also includes giving his time and energy to something like this, joining the Life Is Peachy podcast, episode 10, to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Out of Existence. Rob, thank you so much for hanging out today and sharing your thoughts and memories with us. It's really appreciated.
Well, hey, man, I'm finally glad we were able to make it happen.
Yeah.
It was nice doing this, man, and I appreciate your love, especially that you're seeking guys like me out to talk to about these albums from the past and stuff. So I'm certainly going to check out some more of your stuff, and I recommend other people do too, because you're doing a good service to the music and metal community here.
Oh, thanks so much, man. Yeah, that really means a lot.
I love this job.
And so there's another episode for the back catalogue. We've officially hit double digits, and as Life Is Peachy is quickly approaching its 1 year anniversary, I'd love to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to all of you out there listening and supporting the podcast. I'm doing the best I can to get these episodes out there for you, and your support, it really goes a long way, so thank you. There is, of course, the Life Is Peachy reaction channel over on YouTube, where I'm hanging out with my amazing partner, Chris Lisa Liefting. If that name sounds familiar, that's because she is responsible for the epic artwork of the podcast. But yeah, you can check it out as I put her through the ropes and delve into some epic videos for artists coinciding with each Life Is Peachy podcast. Links to that and everything else can be found in the description of this episode. If you're feeling up for it, please do whatever you can, whether it's leaving a review over at Apple Podcasts, following the Life Is Peachy Instagram, subscribing to the YouTube page, sharing your favorite podcast episode across social media, becoming a patron over on Patreon. There are a bunch of ways you can help Life Is Peachy, and it is very much appreciated. With all of that out of the way, I wish everyone an amazing day and nothing but love. Thank you for joining me and Rob, of course, and the Life Is Peachy podcast. Thank you for your time and energy. I can't wait to hang with you all again. But until then, I'm Dave, and...
See you at the party, Richter!
Bye-bye!
You know, I can eat a peach for hours.
This episode was written, edited, and produced by myself. Recorded from the comfort of my own home.
DIY style.
With each guest calling in from wherever they happen to be around the world at that particular time. The Life Is Peachy theme song is an original tune for this podcast, written by Tim Richardson. All music by the artist featured in this episode is used with permission. Further details can be found in the description of the specific episode. All artwork is original and illustrated for the Life Is Peachy podcast by Chris Lisa Liefting.